Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hi, I'm Kevin Vost with a new gift-giving idea. Are you trying to convince someone that God really does exist and that God really does care about them? Do you wish you could just hand someone a book that would prove God really does love them and that he really wants to be their friend? Well, there's a book out now that does just that. To find it, Google this title, Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. You'll find it instantly. Just Google Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. That's Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles.
We are on page 103, and we are starting chapter 5, which is about family miracles. It might help readers to know that each person in my family has also experienced many miracles in their own lives as well. This book is about some of the miracles in my life, and there are times when I experience a miracle at the same time that others in my family are experiencing their own miracles as well, often in the same event and in the same time zone too. Even when we do not see miracles in our own lives on certain days, it is still wonderful to see our family members experiencing their own miracles. Miracles help us all to believe more fully in God, and they help us to grow more mature in faith. God allows us and wants us to share our miracles with others in order to give others hope as well. Part of God's plan was to create families. The family cell is where we learn to love and to care for others and to be cared for by others. It is also the place where we learn to navigate through the dynamics of living with others. Sometimes others are, different than us, and sometimes their likes and dislikes are different than our own. God obviously intended for us to exist in the form of families by the ways he created human beings to be both male and female, and then telling them to go out and increase and multiply. This miracle is about my son's den mother. My son had decided that he wanted to join the Cub Scouts since a few of his friends were already Cub Scouts. My wife, Julie, and I discussed it and decided to participate, but my wife was unable to attend the first meeting with the parents, so we agreed that I would attend for both of us, and I would summarize things for her later. When I arrived at the first parents' meeting, I was surprised to notice that all of the other parents were all moms. I was the only dad present. I quickly learned that the parents who led the Cub Scouts, at least at the time in our area, were all called den moms, not den fathers. I think my face was a bright red for the whole first meeting. Many wonderful moms tried to assure me that it was fine if I wanted to be a den dad because they would help me whenever necessary. One of the most knowledgeable women present even handed me a book to read which outlined the things we den moms, or dads, do for our sons in the program. She told me that I would see proof in this book that it is really okay to be a den father. I flew to California on business the very next day, so I brought the book with me to read on the plane. We got up above the clouds where the sky is beautiful and clear and where the clouds look like a cotton carpet beneath the plane. This is pretty high up, and it makes me think of heaven when I fly above the clouds. This was a great time for me to pull out the Cub Scout book to take my mind off how far above the earth we were. I do not like being up that high without a parachute. Almost immediately, as I began to read the little book, I noticed that the book said, this year, Eric's dad had decided that he would become the den mom because Eric's mom was too busy to commit for the year. Yes, I guess you guessed it by now. My son's name happens to be Eric, and the book starts out saying that Eric's father decided to be the den mom this year. Can you please imagine the precision of this miracle with me for a moment so that we can both glorify God? Notably, someone wrote a book about den moms and cited that Eric's dad was going to be a den dad for that year. And one of the moms just happened to have an extra copy of this book to give me on the previous night. And I was already feeling very close to God at this elevation above the clouds before I read the words, which just now gave me goosebumps. Some people call events like this merely a coincidence, but that is a short-sighted decision. For sure, you can imagine how dedicated I was to be a good den father now that I knew Jesus had arranged for a book to be written in history that said Eric's dad was going to be the den mom this year. And this was actually happening to me and my son Eric on that day too. Thank you, Jesus, for this miracle, which I have treasured now for many, many years. We are on page 106 now, and this miracle is about my daughter's first car purchase. My youngest daughter, Tanya, had decided to purchase her own first car. She asked me to go along with her since it was her first time in purchasing a car, just in case she needed some minor help. She had called ahead and already picked the exact car she wanted, and all we needed to do was pick the color and the interior from the many models they already had on the lot for her selection. Then we would sign the paperwork and be on our way. Unfortunately, as we began to sign papers, a lot of additional costs came up for things which they should have explained to her beforehand, because what we thought was part of the original price had now become extra costs. The extra costs then made the loan amount higher, and then the monthly payments became too high for the intended budget. The short story is that they were trying to take advantage of her at the final signing. Accordingly, as a father trying to protect his daughter, I naturally took the whole thing personally. They thought they could deal with her alone since she was signing the loan and I was just there as a dad. As I began to debate and try to squash each cost add-on, they had to call in other higher-level managers to make decisions until we got to what seemed like a marathon conference with 4 of them on their side of the conference debate. Every time I asked a question, I would have to listen through all 4 sales-minded people trying to convince me that they were right to add the cost to her loan. The last man they brought in was about 7 feet tall and I think around 450 pounds. We still joke about how their pinch hitter was more like Goliath coming in for the kill. What we were originally told would take about 30 minutes really took about 90 minutes because each question required them to get a higher authority to approve the price. I think this is what they call waterboarding, I think. I personally felt as if I had aged 5 years or more during the process. The biggest event to make me age the most was when they each had to proudly give me a detailed scientific lesson on why they had to undercoat the car to protect the outside bottom of the car at a price which I thought was insane. After they concluded all 4 of their proud lectures on undercoating, I was blessed and inspired by Jesus, who was trying to keep me calm and focused for the whole time I was there. He inspired me to say the following calmly and courageously, as if I was King David with my slingshot ready to slay Goliath. And so I said, well, if undercoating is as crucial and vital as you all said, then it most naturally must have been an item the factory forgot to do before shipping the car here to your lot with faulty undercoating. Therefore, since the factory messed up and left it undone, you need to charge the factory, not us, for the cost. So we made it a deal breaker, and we basically got them to cover the undercoating cost while we paid for some other things instead. What I did not tell you above was that I was interiorly praying to Jesus throughout the whole ordeal, and I was trying to do what I believed Jesus wanted me to do and say in the whole episode. But I did not see any clues at all because things were happening so fast that all I could do was keep asking Jesus for help and then to say whatever came into my mind at each moment. All I had was my faith that Jesus was guiding me, even when I felt annoyed and angry and hurt about how they were trying to take advantage of my daughter to get more money for their car. I was reminded that Jesus had promised to give us the precise words to use when we are trying to be good and Christ-like in situations like this. So I trusted that, and I kept saying what I felt Jesus wanted me to say, even after their own Goliath came into the room. Then, at the end of this ordeal, as we walked by the new car on the way out, my greatest concern was that perhaps we had just purchased a car which Jesus did not want us to purchase. I was tempted to think that perhaps Jesus was expecting us to cancel the deal and to leave without the car. But then I did see the following miracle clue. Can you glorify God with me now, please? For you see, as we were passing by the new car on the way out, the salesman asked me to read the car PIN number to him for his paperwork forms, and the PIN number ended in the numbers 777, which is the holy number that writers have attributed to God in history over the past 2,000 years at least, and which the faithful Jews have also held as a holy number in history for centuries before Christ was born. Jesus had me notice this 777 PIN number at the very end of this ordeal, and he consoled me for trying to be a good dad who also got a great deal out of a sales team of 3 men and 1 Goliath. When God sends me a miracle clue like this, he also touches my soul, so I do know it is a clue from him. As Jesus said in Holy Scriptures in John chapter 10, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." I guess by now it's becoming obvious that we need to be able to talk to God and to listen to God in order to know and do His will. The reason many people do not have many miracles in their lives is because they are not looking for the miracles to turn up in what many call coincidences. But many miracles, in fact, do look like a coincidence. In addition, if we are not asking God what to do and not trying to do what He tells us to do, then we are not coexisting with Him and not noticing His actions in our daily activities. Exhibit C will help anyone who wants a quick refresher on how to have conversations with God, if Chapter 2 above has not already helped you enough to explain the 3 phases of having conversations with God. Exhibit A, which we'll get to later, explains the meaning of the number 777, which confirmed that we did purchase the right car. The next miracle is about my son's first car purchase. We had just relocated our home residence, and our children gave up a lot in friends and their favorite entertainment places, and many more potential places for a better social life in Connecticut. We had just moved to a small town in a remote area of Alabama as a result of another job change. Our teenage son, Eric, had his heart set on a specific car, which my wife and I agreed to help him to purchase in order to get started, so he could then make the car payments later after starting a new job. So we planned out a day for the car search by lining up dealers to go to visit and to find this ideal car. We called ahead and even had some newspaper ads showing some sales by owners to consider as well. Each time we could not find the perfect car at the place where we were visiting, we would naturally consider other cars there too, and talk about them before leaving for the next dealership. We spent about 4 hours visiting several places with absolutely no success at all, and everyone was tired. My son was notably discouraged, of course, and we had prayed beforehand and felt certain that God wanted us to do our shopping on this exact day, especially after all the careful planning we had done beforehand as well. It was a mystery as to why we were not succeeding. Jesus got me to suggest that we should stop for a while and talk things over at a small diner which I knew about, which was just down the road from the last dealership we visited. Nobody seemed to care too much where we stopped, so long as we could stop and collect our thoughts and relax for a while. Please do help me to glorify God here, please, because just as we drove into the diner's parking lot, we saw the exact identical car and also the exact color, which my son was sure he was going to find on that day. We had really just found the exact car, the exact year, make, model, color, and price we were looking for, and there was a for sale sign on it besides. We just had all of our prayers answered, and it was sitting there waiting for us at the diner parking lot. We called the phone number on the sign and gave a deposit on the spot. The Holy Bible tells us to enjoy and find delight in living and acting daily with and close to God in our lives. The Bible, Psalm 37 says, "Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." In a way, I was so pleased that we had to take 4 hours to search and consider many other places before we reached the diner. If we had just gone to the diner and saw the car for sale immediately, then we would not know that all the other places we checked did not have the car beforehand. So the way things wound up happening is exactly what convinced us that this was not a mere coincidence, and that in fact it was a clear miracle. See, we knew that no other place had the exact car we were seeking because we had already gone everywhere else. We're on page 114 now, and we're going to be sharing a miracle called "We Were Relocating for the 7th Time." Let us begin. It was never fun to go through the obvious hardships of pulling up stakes and giving up friends, and it was also the giving up of past vendors and the stores that you have come to trust. Moving away from family was always very difficult too. All of our relocation moves were all job-related, so my career sure seemed to be the culprit. I often felt and noticed that moving was painful for my family, but I rarely had any choice. Seeing what my wife Julie had to give up during each move was really very painful. My wife, who has passed on now, was very artistic and creative, and each time we moved, Julie would design things with great passion and love, which made it obvious that Julie lived here. Each time we left to relocate, I could see how hard it was for her to take down all her artistic and creative decorations, which often would not fit into the decor of our new home. It saddened me to notice the hardship which relocating placed on her too. She was a wonderful wife, and I'm comforted now to know that she finally knows for sure from her place in heaven how much I loved her for all of our 53 years of marriage and all she did for me. We owned a condo which was in a condo complex of about 400 other condos, and there were already 20 condos for sale all around us, and at a far better price per square foot than our place was. In addition, the real estate market was not doing well, and total sales in our area for condos were getting worse every week. We had to get our intended sales price for our sale in order to pay off the 2 mortgages which we had on the property. 2 years of unemployment necessitated a second mortgage. We were given a miraculous opportunity to move to a place where we would be able to survive with the family budget we currently had. We just needed to sell our condo before matters got any worse. So we prayed like we were sinking on the Titanic, and like nothing less than a miracle would work. We prayed about our condo's selling price and dropped it as far as we could drop it. And then we buried copies of the miraculous medal of the Blessed Virgin Mary around the condo entrances, so as to bless all who entered the condo. We asked the Blessed Virgin Mary to please help us to sell the condo in time. A young couple from the first group of shoppers who came along miraculously agreed immediately to our price and gave us a deposit. And it was on the feast day of Saint Rita of Coscia, spelled C-A-S-C-I-A. I mention Saint Rita with great joy here because our last name is Coscia, spelled the same as Saint Rita's name, except we have the vowel O instead of A as the second letter. And this was totally unexpected. The same sounding name miracle. Some people would call this just a coincidence, but I can tell you that when God gives you a miracle, something inside of you tells you that it is truly not a coincidence. What great odds. Sold on the feast day of Saint Coscia, and our name is Coscia. The next thing that was especially noteworthy was that the neighbor across the street from us had a license plate number 777, which, as you know by now, is the holiest of numbers in history, always attributed to God as God's number. On many mornings, as I was pulling out of my driveway, I would see this neighbor pulling out at the exact same time as me. It was unbelievable how many mornings I saw this. I think the average was 3 mornings a week over a 10-year period. The mere thought now of moving away from this condo and this daily 777 morning event, after all these years, 10 years, seemed wrong somehow to me. But I was stunned when I learned that just before we actually moved away, that this neighbor was moving away too, and about 4 weeks before us. I have no doubt that this was another miracle because God was showing me that if I did not move at the time we were moving, then I would still not be seeing that 777 license plate across the driveway every morning, or at least 3 mornings a week. Once again, I had evidence that God lovingly makes things clear to us if we do talk to Him about our problems. Wonder of wonders. After we moved and got to our new address, we noticed the container number which the town had assigned for us to use for our weekly garbage collections. The number stenciled on our garbage pickup bin was 777. So now I could see the number 777 as often as I went to dump my garbage into the main bin outside of our new residence. As usual, God had a great plan all along. Seeing this garbage bin number 777 might seem like a coincidence to some people, but my heart leapt with joy when I saw it because I could sense that Jesus had replaced the car plate which I used to see at the old address only 3 days a week, with this 777 stenciled on our new garbage container for me to see every single day, and guess what? For 7 days instead of 3 days. Again, 7 being God's holiest number. On our first day in our new town, I went looking around for a new church to join, so I drove to several churches to visit and to see where my spirit might feel more at home. The very first church I went to visit had a white pickup truck parked right next to the door, which I had entered for my visit. And its license plate had only 3 things on it. It had the letter D. That's D for Donald, D for dog. And it had the letter D, but it had 3 Ds. The license plate, all it said was D, D, D. I asked Jesus about that, and he helped me to notice that the letter D is the 4th letter of the alphabet, and the license plate DDD therefore means 444, which is the holy number which signifies the holy name of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Well, that was awesome, because the church I had just entered was therefore perfectly named because it was named St. Mary's Church, and it was already dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. This also reminded me that we had placed medals of the Blessed Virgin Mary around the entrances to the condo and asked for her help to make the sale so that we could move to this new town. Thank you, Jesus, for sending us clues as we try to walk with you and do your will, Lord. It took me about a month to get my first business consulting client in my new location. When I went to their place of business for my first meeting, I noticed that there were 2 car license plates in their parking lot. One was 555 and the other license plate was 777, and both parked right outside the building I was entering. Later, as I was leaving my meeting, I asked my new client if he knew who owned those 2 vehicles, and he said, yes, one belonged to me and the other one belongs to my wife. Info for you, the number 555 stands for God's grace, meaning God's presence, and 777, as you know, means God's permission, participation, and approval. So I knew God had a plan in giving me my first client with this clue, especially after the hardship of relocating so far away from my last home. We had moved about 80 miles away, and I did not know any businesses in this new area. It was very soothing and comforting to sense that Almighty God had planned for me to see these 2 plates at my first client's visit in this new area. After 40 years of seeing numerical clues, you can tell when Jesus is sending a number clue as a personal miracle. And as I indicated above, Jesus impresses it on our hearts to notice whenever he sends us a miracle. In summary, then, we had placed medals of the Blessed Virgin Mary at the entrances to the condo, seeking her help with the sale. Then we sold to the first group of visitors who came, on the feast day of St. Rita of Coscia, with our name being the same except for 1 letter. Then the license plate number, which I did see 3 days a week, got replaced. They were moving away anyway, but it got replaced by our new address, where our garbage bin has the number 777, which I will see every day for 7 days a week. Finally, as I was looking for a church to join, I found St. Mary's with a license parked outside the main door with DDD, which means 444, as a clue that this was the church God had selected for me. And my first 2 clients in the area had license plates of 555 and 777. I'm trying to point out in this summary that this miracle was really 5 or 6 miracles all rolled into one. God is so amazing, and what a great friend he is. We are on page 120 now, and we're talking about the miracle called Baptism of Our Baby, St. Xander. Let us begin. Our daughter Lisa was pregnant and ready to give birth to her 3rd son. He was already expected and already named Xander, a form of the name Alexander, and he was lovingly expected and prepared for with all kinds of preparations, like the special room and all the new things he would need to welcome him, like special clothing and furniture and toys. Unfortunately for us, however, he was born into heaven and not onto earth, because he had already died just one day before the scheduled delivery, and he was stillborn at the time of delivery. This was hard to bear for everyone, but most especially for my daughter, who knew about the stillbirth, but only the day before delivery. Her doctor had said that everything was fine just 2 days earlier. Lisa had to go through the process of delivery anyway, and then go through the sadness of a funeral instead of the joy of celebrating Xander's birth. There were many things to get through and to get over, and another stress-causing issue was a spiritual question, a spiritual concern. The question was Xander now in heaven, even though he was not able to be baptized before he had died? I was asked to answer this question for our family because it was a serious and sad concern. I was not being asked for my personal opinion, however. I was being asked, what is the true answer? So I did the research, but there were pros and cons, and I was not sure I really understood the research data I was reading. I wanted to be sure not to mislead my family because of my own hopes and desires interfering with the truth. Fortunately, on the very next morning, I attended morning mass, and I was able to consult with a priest I knew and trusted about all of this. The priest lovingly explained that the Church's teaching in cases like stillbirth is that we can trust in God's mercy and love in such cases. We can do this basically because we know God is love, and all that God does is done in love. And we know that God would not lovingly prevent a stillborn child from entering heaven. The kingdom of heaven is our reward, where we're all headed to, hopefully. And not allowing a stillborn child to enter would be contrary to everything we know and believe about our great loving God. In addition, I was also told that there is a spiritual baptism called baptism by desire. This means that a person who wants to be baptized but dies beforehand is already baptized by their desire. And the desire of the parents or the guardian is also sufficient for a child to also be baptized by desire in cases where the child dies before baptism could actually be performed. Well, at this point, I was relieved and blessed with facts to bring good news to my family. I could not wait to tell them that Xander was already in heaven. On my way home, I was led to stop at a local cemetery to walk along the path and pray my rosary, as is my custom when the weather is good. And an amazing thing happened as I began to walk. Jesus had me stop at a tombstone at the top of the hill I was walking on. And Jesus told me in my mind and heart to brush the heavy bushes away to read the name on this very old tombstone. When I did brush away the bushes, I saw that the name on the tombstone was Xander, my grandson's name. Then Jesus asked me to look down the hill at the third row down the hill and to go down and look at that tombstone too. That stone was lined up perfectly with the stone I was standing next to. So I walked directly ahead and perfectly in a straight line down the hill to see the stone in that row. The bushes around this very old stone were also really, really overgrown. And I had to work pretty hard to pull the bushes away and to read the name on the tombstone. I got a chill up my spine when I read the name on that stone. The stone was 40 years old, and the person buried there had died 40 years earlier, but the name of the person buried there was identical to our grandson Xander. And I mean identical in both the first and the last name too. This means that Jesus knew 40 years ago that I would be walking here on this fateful day after hearing that our baby, our grandson, Saint Xander, was baptized by desire and was now in heaven. And Jesus also knew that Xander was going to have the very same last name also as the person buried here 40 years ago. I felt the closeness of Jesus at that moment, and also the closeness of Xander, whom I had never met. How amazing it is to experience these perfectly planned miracle clues of our great God. God really plans miracles centuries and centuries before we are even born. Please notice this miracle with me now so that we can both glorify God about this wonderful gift. Jesus had actually nudged me and prompted me to notice both tombstones with Xander's first name on both of them as I happened to be walking along and saying my rosary. And both tombstones were obscured by bushes, which I had to brush away in order to read the names on the tombstones. Then Jesus got me to notice that the second tombstone, which was 3 rows down the hill and exactly lined up with the stone I was standing there, and that second stone had both of Xander's first and last names on it. If I were making a movie about this miracle, I would never make it sound like this because nobody would believe it could ever happen in this way. And yet, God did make it happen, and I experienced it too. We need to help people realize how great our God really is and how much He loves us by our explaining the meticulous and awesome steps God actually does take, even in the tiniest details, in order to achieve the miracle gifts He sends to all of us. God is present in even all the tiny minutiae of our daily lives, and we can notice His love in the way He does things. I mean, when we really observe how intricate and amazingly God produces His miracle gifts for us, we get a pretty good idea of how much He must really, really love us to be so meticulous.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT.